Lakshya polled a bunch of people and saw how Kamala Harris would do against Donald Trump in 2028. There was also some drama, of course, online between Lakshya and some people who are very upset about the results of a certain poll that he ran, and I want to talk about it. Hey, everyone, I'm Cam from Bulwark. I'm joined today by Lakshya, our poll expert, Twitter guy, very smart individual. And Lakshya, you put out a favorability ratings of Democrats poll that had Newsom performing all right, AOC performing not quite as well, but pretty close, Harris performing pretty well, and then Zoran not doing great on a national level. And I think a lot of people on Twitter got very upset and spread this misinformation that you were only polling your own readers. And I just wanted you to be able to address that for a moment.
Yeah, I have no idea. Every day I get more and more surprised by how dumb people can be online. But the idea that we would poll our own readers is frankly insulting. And what are the implications of this? Do people really think that the Substack subscribers of a liberal magazine, 44% of them don't know who Zoran Mamdani is or haven't heard enough of him to form an opinion? Do people really think that that is what we're saying? Because that's insane. Look, all our poll found was basically that, they're generic Democrats, Gavin Newsom and AOC, and they both perform, pretty close together. Harris is a little bit worse off than them.
I don't know. AOC and Newsom seem different enough that folding them into the same group. If Newsom's generic, is AOC also generic? I feel like she's in my opinion, palatable enough that one could call her generic.
I think AOC has essentially become closer to generic Democrat than many people want to think. She is, still on the more left end of the Democratic Party. That much is definitely true. And Newsom is not really. But if you ask most people in America substantively, there's not going to be that much of a difference between them. There's a little bit, but really, the difference is just Newsom does slightly better with Republicans, slightly better with independents. AOC does slightly better with Democrats. They're very close together. Meanwhile, our poll just found Zoran as significantly more unpopular nationally. And I said, I'm look, this doesn't really matter because he's not running for mayor of America. But for all of the people asking, what should national Dems do about Zoran? One reason that you're seeing Gillen and Swazi really hammer him is because they're concerned because they represent swing districts and America as a whole doesn't like Zoran. Now, that's okay. Again, that's fine because he's not.
The majority of people haven't heard enough to say.
That's not true. The plurality of people haven't heard enough to say, not the majority.
Plurality means biggest percentage?
That's correct. But Cam, think about it this way. You're correct that the plurality of people haven't heard enough of him to say much, but of the people that do know of him, he's very unpopular. He's more unpopular than AOC. He's more unpopular than Newsom. He's more unpopular than Harris. The only person he's more popular than is Chuck Schumer, which a pile of radioactive waste would be more popular than Chuck Schumer. And here's the thing. We decided let's control for is it just Republicans have heard a lot about him and Democrats haven't? So we looked by subgroup. Among Democrats and among independents is where Zoran actually underperforms Newsom and AOC in favorability ratings among people who know of who he is, right? Versus people who know who Newsom is, people who know who AOC is. The people who know who Zoran is don't like him. And for Zoran to reverse that, the people who haven't heard of him would have to like him by the opposite margin.
Well, I think that, if and when Zoran wins, which there's a lot of people sounding an alarm bell that's not looking as likely right now. I think that's kind of ridiculous. Cuomo might be closing the gap, but not as much as he needed. It was a very fucking big gap. But I think that Zoran in office and Zoran as depicted on the campaign are going to be very different things. And with how much of these people are in the haven't heard enough to say category, there's a lot of growth opportunity for him to win those people. And there's more growth opportunity for him than there is for the other people. So I think he's just kind of an outlier in a sense on this poll, especially since, he has double the haven't heard enough to say over Schumer. So I think that drawing any conclusions about his national favorability, first of all, what you said first was the most important thing, which is he's not running for president of the United States. It does not matter how popular Zoran is in Wisconsin. And I think that some Democrats who think that he's going to reflect negatively upon the party as a whole. Two things. Number one, are being a little dramatic. Number two, are have a different estimation of what he's actually going to be like in office, right? I mean, Zoran in recent weeks has displayed a certain malleability in some regards that even some people on the left are pretty upset about. So I think that the conclusion from this is not necessarily that Zoran is fatally unpopular around the country. I think it's that there's a lot of room to see what happens next. Would you say that's fair?
I think that's fair to say. I would just say that, right now he is unpopular in the country among every subgroup that knows him, and the question is just, or like more unpopular than other Democrats among every subgroup that knows him. The question is, can he turn it around? Will it get any better for him as he becomes mayor of New York? The only reason these favorability ratings are informative for us is they tell us why Democrats are doing what they're doing, with like a lot of swing district Democrats being reluctant to embrace him, reluctant to endorse him. That's why. That's the only thing that this really shows us and explains. And it's fine, right? Like there's still things you can learn from him. You can say like, yeah, his focus on affordability is what let him catapult through the front of the entire Democratic field. Like that's one of them. It's just,
I guess one of the other things for me is like that makes it so important that this is New York. This is a New York race. Is like people around the country being asked about Zoran do not know the implications of him saying that he would ask Jessica Tisch to stay on, right?
yeah, for sure.
And a bunch of the different kind of center friendly things he has displayed. I think, and then there's a big weakness of Zoran's that I think even your median New York voter is not going to know much about, which is when he was asked about Props 2 to 5 on the New York ballot and was like, I haven't assumed a position on this. And it's like, for those of you who don't know, Lakshya, correct me if I'm wrong, Props 2 to 5 are sort of abundance adjacent propositions that are basically trying to make it to cut a lot of the fat in city council bureaucracy for different things to get approved. And I think there's some people in the city council like Adrian Adams who are opposed to these things because the city council derives a lot of its power from certain systems in place. And this would kind of make certain things a lot easier and cut through certain government red tape. And a lot of the socialists and a lot of the abundance moderate libs are all like, yeah, we need to support Props 2 through 5. I was really weirded out by the fact that Zoran didn't have a position on that. But again, I don't think your average New Yorker knows much about that, much less your average person around the country. So I think there's strengths and weaknesses of his that just are not apparent to the people who are only hearing people talk about him on like Fox or CNN.
Sure, I can get behind that. Like, again, there's a lot of complexity to this. I just think that we on the liberal side have got to stop having PTSD over numbers and realize that like we can have all these discussions in a good faith sense without saying like, you just polled your own readers. That doesn't matter. Like that's obviously false. And like, that's the thing, right? We can't become like the right where they have this extreme allergy to facts. Like we can deal with the numbers. We can rationalize them. We can talk about them. We don't need to lie about them.
Great. Well, with the time I still have from you, I want to get into two other things. One of them being you guys polled who would win a Harris versus Trump matchup in 2028. Kamala Harris barely edged Trump out 51% to 49%. And some people were asking you, why did you even bother to poll people about Trump, given that it would be his illegal third term? And I wanted you to address that.
Well, okay. I mean, people are saying, oh, you're conditioning people to believe he's going to run for a third term. I'm like, no, man, the people conditioning anyone to believe it are the fact that Donald Trump keeps hinting at a third term, has a Trump 2028 hat, the fact that the House Republicans keep cheering that shit on, and the fact that Steve Bannon keeps talking about it. That's what's conditioning them. When this enters the public discourse, it is the duty of numbers people to actually evaluate how things like that would go so we understand the danger that we're facing, the threat that we are facing as a country. The reality is, if Kamala Harris ran today, right, for if she ran in another election against Donald Trump and Trump was running for a third term, Harris would very, very, very narrowly win, is what our poll shows, despite Trump having negative 10 approvals. And that tells us something. That tells us, hey, maybe we need to wake the hell up to whatever this threat is and figure out how, as a party, we can defeat MAGA again, because this can't happen. If the Supreme Court plays Calvin ball and lets him run again, what the hell are we going to do? We got to figure out how are we going to stop an unconstitutional threat like that, right? Like, how can we defeat him at the ballot box again if it comes to that? Are there any judicial techniques Democrats can use to block this. Can they block his name from appearing on the ballot on their states or whatever? But we're not conditioning people to believe that he's going to run again. Trump is doing that himself.
Yeah, and Harris has also hinted at this, by the way. This isn't just a random hypothetical. Harris, I think just yesterday or the day before, said, she's something along the lines of like not entirely opposed to running again.
Yeah.
Perhaps I am slightly paraphrasing it. But this is not an impossible matchup. I don't think I'm that confident Harris would necessarily get the nomination. Part of me kind of never knows what to assume from the Democrats at this point. And part of me is like, of course, they're going to anoint her. I don't really know.
I don't think they will. It's with Newsom, but that's a separate topic.
You think they're going to pick Newsom?
I think so, but let's see. A lot of time.
Okay, well, last thing that you guys put out that I wanted to talk about was, what do Americans think about immigration's local impact? There were results on the economy, culture, public safety, and overall. I think that these were interesting results to me because, you had somewhat positive and neither positive nor negative kind of dominating. I kind of expected a lot more negative response on immigration, and I'm curious what you took away from this.
The immigration stuff, Americans have a bunch of complex views on it, right? Like they believe, for example, that what Trump is doing, a lot of them think it's an overreach. They think that they're not really comfortable with the mass Gestapo snatching up people off the streets and going haywire. But also fundamentally, this electorate is very conservative on immigration relative to what it was 4 years ago. And we have to understand that so we can actually begin from a basic reality of what should we do in order to change minds, convince people that, hey, immigrants are a net good to America, right? Like these numbers, both sides have something to like in them. Both sides have something to dislike. For immigrants, for all the conservatism of the electorate on immigration, it should be noted that it's only a 25% salience right now. 25% of people rated that as a top two issue. You know what they were for healthcare and for cost of living? Two issues that are Trump's worst by far. Cost of living was 62%, healthcare was 42%. So, those are much bigger red flags for Trump. Like, yeah, people are kind of conservative on immigration. The Republican Party still has like a +6 edge with the electorate on that. But people don't care about immigration as much as they care about cost of living or healthcare. That's much bigger for Trump.
Yeah, I was also interested in how the largest percentage on this is 37%, neither positive nor negative in terms of public safety. I thought maybe this is because I'm in New York City and I'm reading a lot of New York media, including right-leaning New York media. I thought there would be a much bigger negative feeling about public safety, but I also think, that kind of raises the conversation about how people feel very threatened by ICE. But I guess my last question for you is, when it comes to cost of living and healthcare, do you think Democrats would have an easier time exploiting how atrocious the Trump administration has been on immigration than healthcare and cost of living? Because it seems like the healthcare and cost of living, disaster that has come about in this administration has been a little bit tougher for Democrats to kind of break through to everybody on than the immigration thing, which I'm not saying that the electorate is the podcast bros, but it behooves me to point out that even the podcast bros are pretty upset about it. Do you think Democrats should look at this potential wedge on immigration and focus their energy on that? Or do you think it all needs to go to healthcare and cost of living? I don't want to present it as a binary option, but I guess what I'm saying is
I think it's fair. It's got to go to healthcare and cost of living. That's the thing that we would win on. That's what people don't trust Republicans on. We got to focus our efforts on fights that we can really, really hammer MAGA on. And I think healthcare and cost of living are their two weakest points.
Well, Lakshya, I know you only had X amount of time today, so we'll leave it there. But more polls coming soon, more conversations coming soon. Thanks so much for joining, everybody. We'll be talking to you very, very soon.